Okay, good Erev Shabbos. We left off yesterday in the middle of a stira. The Mishnah had said, we began the second parak. The Mishnah had said that one should not bring his animal by an inn of a guy and leave it there because you're going ahead and you'll be over on liftei evil esite michshol, because the guy is we're suspicious about znus, that'll do an act of znus to the animal. On the other hand, the Brisa says one is permitted to purchase an animal from a guy and bring it as a carbon. Now, if we're chayish that he's going to go ahead and do an avera to the animal, we should not be able to go ahead and use it for a carbon, because one of the things that we learned is an animal that was roveo or nirva, but one can't go ahead and use as a carbon. You see, you're not chayish for znus. So we saw two terutzim. The first teretz was of Tachlifa. Tachlifa says there's a difference between your animal and the guy's animal. When it comes to the guy's animal, we're worried. He's not going to go. We're not worried because he's not going to go ahead and do an act of znus to. If it's a female animal, it's going to go ahead and cause it to be sterile. If it's a male animal, it's going to cause it to its skin. It's not skin. Its meat will go ahead and be inferior. It'll weaken, and therefore his own animal he won't do an act of znus to. Mashen Kain, it's your animal. He has no problem. So really, we are chayish for revia, but it's when it comes to geld, when it comes to geld, it's an under revel. When it comes to money, the guy is going to be what? He's going to not go ahead and do an act of avera to his animal. That was the first teretz we saw. We began a second teretz, and we'll go over it again. It's the teretz of Ravina, and let's begin on Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph. Let us begin on Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph. I'm coming to answer the stira between the Mishnah and the Brisa, whether we're chayish a goy for znus or not. Ravina Amar loy kasha hal lechatchila. Our Mishnah is speaking lechatchila. Lechatchila, we are chayish for an act of znus, and therefore do not bring your animal to a place where a guy might do an act of znus. Hadiyeved, but once you buy the animal, we're not chayish retroactively that an act of znus was done to the animal. Let's see Rashi. Ravina mahada letrutze masnisan. Ravina is going back to answer the stira between masnisan and Brisa, Dila'el. La'olam chashidi, we are chayish for znus. Umasnisan lechatchila katani. The Mishnah said that you can't bring your animal to an inn is because we're chayish znus. The ein ma'amidim. Mishum dilma ravala. Maybe he'll do an act of znus. U'Brisa the tani ein chosheshin mishum roiveya, and therefore you can, or mishum nirva, is the eved. Is speaking to the eved that you bought it already. The mishum l'sha'avar kaboyas lemisra. We want to go ahead and retroactively say it's asa. Dilma kvarova. Perhaps it didn't act as nus. Ul kvarova lechashinan. That we're not chayish. So initially we are chayish, but once you buy the animal, right, we're not chayish. Says the Gemara Umarat Heimro. How do you know the shiny bein lechatchila bein the eved? How do you know there's a difference between lechatchila and the eved? Obviously, it's not speaking about regular lechatchila, red the eved. It's speaking, as Rashi says, the lemidi the choshid bei shani la bein lechatchila the eved. In other words, of course, there's dins lechatchila you shouldn't do, and if you do, it's okay. We're not asking that what's the difference in lechatchila with the eved. We're saying when it's an inyan of chshad, it's something that what you are concerned that's something to be suspicious about. There's a difference in lechatchila to be suspicious and b'di'eved not to be suspicious, right? In other words, that's nakuda. That lechatchila you should be chayish, but b'di'eved once you did it already, we're not chayish. Where do you see that? It's none. Like tisyached isha imahem, the Mishnah said a woman should not be misyached with goyim mishum chashudim al arayis because the chayish al arayis. In other words, it's interesting. The Mishnah listed things that you even lift the evil to michshol. So one was bringing an animal there. Another one was a woman should not be miyachid with them. So of course the woman for herself, but even for the guy there'll be an inyan of lifnei iver, because you're placing the guy. If the chayish for a guy for his nus, right? If that was that Mishnah, right? The chayish a yid should not be miyachid with a guy because you worry shvichas damim. So in other words, of course, for your own self, but l'chayr you'd be able to lifnei iver. If they're chayish for this thing, you'd be over lifnei iver. So you should not be chayish. A woman should not be miyachid with a guy because of arayas. Good. That's what I'm Mishnah. Urimini, I'll ask you a stira. A woman that's captured Bidei oivdei kechavim, al yedei mamin. If it was al yedei mamin, Rashi says, shehoisa chayeves mamin, she was chayev money. She was chayev money, then muteris lebaila. She's mutter to her husband. Okay? Al yedei nefashos, but if she was captured because she was chayiv misa, then asur lebaila, she would be what? Asa to her husband. Now, Pashtus, what's the difference? Is that in the nefashos, since she's going to get killed, they don't care, they're not going to do anything they want to her. Mamin, there seems to be a svara that really we should worry, but once it's done, we're not. So the kasha is, not the kasha, the raya that Rabbi Ravina wants to bring, that where you have a chashad, that there's a difference in the chachil b'di'eved. Over here, there's a chashad of znus, right? That if the woman is with the goyim, there's a chashad of znus. Rashi says, what's the chashad? Maybe she'll acquiesce to the goy and do it willingly if she's an Eishes Yisrael. If she's an Eishes Kayin, then you have to worry about the act of rape, of being an anusa, right? You have to worry about anusa. So therefore, it's a bigger chashad, right? It's a bigger chashad. But Yisrael, you have to say she acquiesced. Over here, even she didn't acquiesce by an Eishes Kayin. So either way, the raya is from the fact that what? She's mutter to her husband. So there's a chashad of znus lechatchila. She should not be miyachid with a goy. But if she's miyachid with a goy, yes, by linyan mamin, then b'di'eved you're not worried. So Ravina L'chayra has proven his point where there's a chashad, there's a difference between lechatchila and b'di'eved. Elalav shmamina says the Gemara shani law ben lechatchila b'di'eved. There's a difference in lechatchila b'di'eved. Says what kind of raya is this? Memai. I feel the Evid I feel the Evid also. You have to be chayish. You know why? You know why? By she's chapped for money. You know why they're not going to do anything to her? The misyari mishum hefsid memayna. If they're mafka this woman and treat her in a terrible way, her husband's not going to pay. They have something to gain over here. They want their money. So memela, where they want their money. The reason why they're not do anything is because they want their money. So in other words, Ravina, your proof is not a proof. You want to say lichatchili, you shouldn't be there, but if b'di'eved you're there, it's okay. No. Even b'di'eved it's not okay. But there's a svara why by dinei maminis where she owes money and the husband's going to pay to get her back. They're not going to do anything because they want their money. V'hachwa in the time of the misyarim b'shem hefsim b'maynai. Teida, I'll prove it to you. Diktani seifa. When it comes to what? Nefashos, asur lebaila. She's asa to her husband. 1 second. B'di'eved, if you tell me it's the b'di'eved, what's the difference in dinei nefashos and dinei maminis? L'chayr, there shouldn't be any difference. Elamah, when you're chayish, and therefore there's no difference. So in other words, Ravina's din may be a good din, but the raya he wants to bring from a woman being captured is nishkan raya. V'sulay midi, and there's nothing else to talk about. Garnish vas tzedness, Kenny would say. There's nothing to talk about whatsoever. Okay? Says Rashi, V'sulay midi, ein lahakshais al davazeh, devadei taima yedei momin mutam yishum dechayish every kechavim lehefsim memayna. That's the reason. The reason why memayna she's permitted is not because b'di'eved we're not chayish, right? It's because of money. Now let's see Taisus here. V'sulay midi, pirish. The two Taisus in the bottom. The Sulay Midi, Pirish. The Vadei Hefsid Mamin shiny. Vadei Hefsid Mamin is different. So really, be'emes, we are chayish. But by Hefsid Mamin, it's different. Aval Yichud Ba'alma, Eimer Da'asa, Af B'di'eved. Now, the Lashon over here doesn't say captured. The Lashon over here of our Mishnah is, Yisha should not be misyachid. And he wanted to bring a raya, but a woman who was captured. Tema, Imkain. You'd never have a case where Eishes Kayin would be able to live with her husband. It's not possible in her life that they wouldn't have a possibility of being miyachid for an hour with a guy. And since there's no hefsid mamin, we're chayish. In other words, let's fear the Gemara. You, Ravina, are saying this is in L'chila b'di'evet. Good. You wanted to bring a raya from Yichud Mamin that the fact that what? That once it's done, and therefore you don't say that you shouldn't be, but if you are, you're still mutter. That's not the reason. The reason you mutter is that he wants money. If you take away that svara, then yichud would be aser. If you take away the svara money, guys, right? Yichud's aser. Take the place of bomb kasha. So in Cain, Ashes Kayin, miyachi with a guy should be aser. You hear the svara, guys. Ashes Kayin. If you don't have the svara of money, right? You take that away. So Ashes Kayin, miyachi again. Miyachi and mechayish the guy for his nus. He's going to go. So you want, says the Lashon of Tosfos, in Cain Lein, Nachta Basla Avram Avinu Eishes Kain, with the Lashon, a starka Lashon. You're not leaving a daughter of Avram Avinu mutter to a husband. Very strong Lashon. V'yesh Leimar. The Ein Ze Ela Dichi Ba'alma. This is only a Dichi Ba'alma. Kleimar. Me'hach Eloi Teichiach. You can't bring a raya from over here. Umi Kol Makoim, Divrei Ravina, Emesheim. Pirish. The teretz stays. The teretz stays. Guys, the lumdus. The teretz stays. There's a difference in lechatchila and b'di'evet. Lechatchila, do not go ahead and leave your animal in a place where a guy can get it. B'di'evet, if you do, it's okay. B'di'evet, you do, it's okay. Uminot temra, where do you have minot temra, where do you have a raya from? The case of a woman. The Gemara is saying, Tosfos is saying, the Gemara is not retracting from his teretz. The Gemara is retracting from his proof. His proof's not a good proof, but his teretz is a good teretz. Uminot temra, how do you know this? This is in the L'chila b'di'evet, and he brings a raya. Your raya is not a raya, but ein achinami, there's a difference. Memela b'di'evet, if a Ashes Kohen is in a room with a guy, she'll be okay. That's Tosfos teretz. So he's not, in other words, it's not upslugging Ravina. It's upslugging Ravina's teretz, his raya, but his teretz is a good teretz. V'oid yesh leimar, the afilu l'fiyah maskana ein lesser yichud muad. Even the maskana that a guy is chayish for his nus, we're not going to go ahead and asa yichud muad. The dafka nech b'sha, right? Shiny. It's when she's captured, it's different. L'fishehi musara biyadoi kein behema. She's in the hands like they'll treat her like an animal. She's a hostage, right? Think about a woman who's captured. Leilenu, we think about Bisman Hazeh, right? You think about these women who are in captivity in Gaza. Chas v'shalom, what's going on with them? Chas v'shalom. The hacha debiyodei l'rava aval hecha she'ena hachas yodei alori kechavim klal. When you're not underneath the oppression of the goyim, v'yechoyla litzoik, and she's able to scream. V'yela Mashiach. She's scared. So in other words, stam yichud. If you're not in Gaza, if you're in a place with an Arab in a room, a woman's going to scream at the top of her lungs in Israel. You have nothing to worry about. So there's a difference. That we said that the difference between Mammon and the Fasha is speaking Nech B'Shah, where she was captured. Captured's different. They're going to treat it differently. Okay. Right, and we're not asking on that yichud. So Tosfos gives two truths. Okay, what's Tosfos kasha? Gavaldiga kasha. Frek Tosfos is a bomb. If you're telling me that you slug up Ravina, if you're slugging up Ravina, that means afilu b'di'eved that yichud is asa. If yichud's asa, then an Ashes Kayin would not be able to live with a husband, which is a bomb kasha. Says Tosfos two truths. One, we didn't slug up Ravina, we just slugged up Bizraya. So inachinami b'di'eved yimuta. Says Tosfos a second teretz in Lomdis. There's a difference between yichud and a difference between nech b'shah, where she's captured in the jurisdiction of the goyim and oppressed. They could treat her like an animal, just like they'll be roveya, an animal. They'll be manas and isha. It doesn't make a difference. Mashein kein wad. If you're not captured, it's stam yichud, right? Then she's just screaming. Everything will be okay. Two beautiful terutzim. I think it's fascinating. This Gemara, guys. My brother Zalman last week told me a maisa that I went out of my mind. It's the most pelitic maisa. It's unbelievable how great a person is. Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, Tzaddik Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yagan Aleinu, was the Satmar Rav. He was an unbelievable chassid and tzaddik. the Satmar, he built up Satmar in Williamsburg. It's a huge Chassidus. And unfortunately, for many people, all they know about Satmar is that what? As the anti-Zionists. That's all unfortunately, that's all they know. But again, Baruch does business with them. These are unbelievable people. They're not. He was nifted in 1979. So this Meister goes back many years. It seems one of the Israeli, I don't know, was an ambassador or a diplomat. Anyway, he's coming to the United States, and his wife had some contraband, and they arrested her at the airport. They arrested her. The news got to Rabbi Yoel. He was asked, the Satmar Rav was asked to get her out, if it's possible. Now, the Satmar Rav has thousands, tens of thousands of Hasidim. Many of them, if you want something done, you get something done. He knew who to go to. He had a chassid that was connected with the government. And anyway, Kachoya, the chassid interceded on behalf of the ambassador's wife, and she was let out. She didn't spend the night in jail. Let out that day. The chassid came back to Rav Yoel, and he said to him, the Rebbe, like, why were you so adamant that I should take care of this? And the Rebbe was pushing it, like, you got to make sure you take care of it. He goes, why are you so adamant about this? And listen to what he said. He said, I recognize the name, the last name, the surname of the ambassador. In the Alta Haim, we had a person by the same surname. That person was a Kohen. I was worried that if she would spend the night in prison, she's an Ashes Kohen, she'd be us to a husband. You hear a story? You hear what he thought about? You hear a Goin, you hear a tzaddik, a chassid, you hear this? This is what he's thinking about. I knew a name of a person in the Alta Haim that's the same name. I was choshid, it's a Kohen, she's an Ashes Kohen. If she's captured, haint to a Gemara, guys. Nech b'shot, hachas yadeh. It's amazing. Amazing story that he told it to me just last week. It's an amazing to be able to bring it into share today. It's an unbelievable ma'aseh. Unbelievable ma'aseh. Okay. Okay, so we have two terutzim so far to the stira, right? We have a stira, our Mishnah, which says Yechayish v'znus, the brisa that says you can buy a carbon from him, that you're not chayish v'znus. Yeah, that was the stira. We had with the teretz of Rav Tachlifa the difference between your animal that he would be roiveya and his own animal that he won't. And now we have the teretz of Ravina, our Mishnah speaking lichatchila, and the brisa speaking b'di'evet. Rav Padus Amar loy kasha, a third mahalach to answer up. We're going to say it's a machlokes tanoim. Rav Padus Amar loy kasha, ha Rabbi Eliezer, ha Rabbanon. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Eliezer. The brisa goes according to Rabbanon. Let's meet them. Did nan gabi poris chatas by paraduma. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, eina nikachas min oivdei kechavim. You cannot buy a paraduma from goyim. The chachamim matirim, right? My lab b'hakamifli. The Rabbi Eliezer saba chashinin l'revia, and therefore the paraduma will be chayish dawat, an act as nus was done to it, and therefore what you can't go a chiddush. We'll see in a second that you won't be able to go ahead and use it. Rabbanan savri loy chashin l'revia. You're not chayish l'revia. I mean, mainly you could buy it. Now, before we go weiter, the paraduma is not brought in the Beis Hamikdash. The paraduma is brought on Har Zeisim, right? It's burnt up there. Blood is spritzed towards the oil moyed, but it's not spritzed in the Mizbeach. For all intents and purposes, it doesn't have Kedushas Haguf. It's not a carbon. It's known as Kedushas Berek Habayis. So Mehecha Tesa, before you have to understand, why would there be an Isser of Harva that Rebbe Eliezer said you could not go ahead and buy a paraduma, right? Why would you say that? Mimai, says the Gemara, Mimai. How do you know that this is the Svaras Machloikas that Eliezer says you can't buy it, and Rebbe, the Chacham say you could. Dilma the Kuliyama loy chashin el revia, and therefore Rapadis can't explain the Mishnah this way because everyone is not chayish l'revia, even Rebbe Eliezer. So let Rebbe Eliezer, why can't you buy it? But in the time of Rebbe Eliezer, Kid Rav Yehuda Marav, Dam Rav Yehuda Marav, Haniach aleim uda shal sakin pasla ubeegla al shetimshach ba. We know that the paraduma, you cannot go ahead and put anything on it. You can't have anything on it. If it works, an oil or even anything on it. We had a Gemara. If a male mounted it for procreation, whether the yasser, if a bird flies on its back. In other words, the reason why you can't buy it is you chayish that the guy went ahead and used it. And if he used it, if there was something on it, like oil, you can't have an oil on top of it. You could have an oil on top of it, it just can't work with it. Okay, so that would be the svara. Masa v'chashina, and Rabbi Eliezer says yechayish, u'masa v'lechashina. So if this is the svara of the machlokes, Rav Padis, you would be incorrect in saying this is a possible way to explain the stira in our Mishnah that we're chayish v'znus and what, and the brisa that we're not. You won't be able to explain using this as a svara. It says more like salkadaitach to say that's the machlokes. Why not? Misham nicha purta le'mafsid tuva. The guy is not a fool. A para aduma is priceless. And we're going to see tomorrow's Gemara. We're going to bring in the mice of Dama ben Nesina. A para aduma is worth a fortune of money. To go ahead and put something on it for a little period of time, you're going to go ahead and lose your money, right? Hachanami, okay. So Neima Mishumana Purta Le Mafsituva. Here also, just because what? For a little hana, he's what? It's a kasha. For the Gemara kasha, right? Okay, so guys, so in other words, really, guys, fair rice. Really, it is a good teretz. Really, the reason is revia. And you can't tell me it has to do with maybe it was used, because it's not going to go ahead. The guy is not going to do it. So, Ella, what must the reason of Rebbe Eliezer be? The reason Rebbe Eliezer would be, right? The reason Rebbe Eliezer would be because he is concerned. He's concerned about what of harva. And right now we're holding it's a good svara to explain the difference and answer the stira. Fred the Gemara Kasha, if you're telling me for a little bit of time he's not mafsid, hachanami lema mishum hanos porto le mafsid tuva. But even for a little hana, why would he go ahead and go ahead and have znus with the animal? In other words, if you put something on the back of the paraduma, is it asabana? I mean, no. Can you use it for paraduma? Allah Rebbe Eliezer, if you're Reveya the animal, can you use it? What's the reason why you can't? You're not worried about him using it? If that's the case, why are you worried about znus? For a little hana, he's going to go ahead and use the. In other words, like Rebbe Eliezer, you're telling me that for a little hana, he's not going to go ahead and take such a huge loss. So why are you chayish l'revia? For a little hana, he's not going to take a loss. Guys, you hear the kasha? Says the Gemara, hachanami. Here also, what does Rebbe Eliezer say? It's asa because of znus to use the paraduma. Leimim shemana putale mafsituva. And for the Gemara, hasam yitzrei takvai. There, we're good. Yes, the Yetzirah. But when it comes to money, the Yetzirah is not so strong. When it comes to znus, the Yetzirah is strong, and therefore we're chayish for revia. And therefore, Rav Padas would not be able to use Rebbe Eliezer as the Tan of the Mishnah, because no one's chayish for revia. V'hachai in the time of Rebbe Eliezer, kiditani shila. This is Sheila, I'm not sure. The Tani Sheila, my time of the Rebbe Eliezer. What's the reason of Rebbe Eliezer? It says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael, v'yichu elecha, right? It says, v'yichu, and they should take for you. What does that mean? B'nei Yisrael yichu, v'eino v'kachavim yichu. Maybe it has nothing to do with anything. Maybe it's a gezeres hakasav. Maybe it's a gezeres hakasav. In other words, you're not chayish l'revia. And therefore, Rav Padas cannot use Rebbe Eliezer as a Tan of Mishnah. Right? And really, you're not chayishim going ahead and putting something on the back because money makes a difference. But the bottom line is v'yichu elecha. You're not chayish to review anything. This animal is kosher v'yasha. It's a pure paraduma she'ein lav mum. It's perfect, except one thing. It's owned by a guy. That's what we're going to get into Tabla ben Nesina, right? It's owned by a guy, and you have to buy it from a yid. If that's the case, then Rebbe Eliezer is not the Tana of a Mishnah, and Rav Padis does not have a teretz. And Rav Padis does not have a teretz. It says, the Tani Seifa, the Chen Hoyer Rebbe Eliezer, Poisel B'chol HaKarbonis Kulan. Not only does he passel the paraduma, he passels all karbonis. V'yisal kedaitach kidik Tani Sheila, Bishleim Mapara Ksiv Bekicha. Elakul karbonis Kicha Ksibahu. So in other words, that can't be the reason. Elo, what must the reason be? The reason must be snus. So again, what happened over here was geschmack, guys. Rebbe Eliezer says you can't buy a paraduma from a guy because we're assuming mechayish l'ravia. We X out chayish for working it, right? We X out chayish for working it. We X out that go ahead and buying it for yichul, because again, if that's the case, you would not be able to buy from a guy, and you could buy from a guy, and it doesn't say kicha there. Elamah, what's the reason? You must be chayish v'znus. V'dil ma'ad kan lei pligi rabban aleh the Rebbe Eliezer. So now we're going in another direction. You're right. In other words, guys, I know clearly Rebbe Eliezer holds that with chayish v'znus as proven from paraduma, and he could be the Tana of our Mishnah that the chayish v'znus. But what's your teretz? Our brisa that says you could go ahead and buy for a carbon, so you see you're not chayish l'snos is going to Rabbanon. So now the Gemara will go in a different direction. You're right. Rebbe Eliezer is chayish l'snos. But how does Adkan le'plig Rabbanon le Rebbe Eliezer amid beis? Ella b'para dedameha yikarim. Since it's worth so much money, he won't be mizana with the animal. Aval b'shar kabanis moidalei. But maybe by other kabbanis to be moidi chayish l'snos. So now you don't have a teretz, guys. What's Rav Padis' teretz? Our Mishnah that is chayish l'snus is Rebbe Eliezer. The brisa that's not chayish l'snus is the Rabbanon. Says the Gemara, the Rabbanon argue on Rebbe Eliezer by paraduma. Maybe dafka paraduma not chayish l'snus because the guy is not going to go ahead and do something to the animal that's going to cause him a huge monetary loss. But stam carbon, if you're chayish l'snus, let's be chayish l'snus. And I guess they're not holding from the Zorah so much about that it's going to go ahead and sterilize the animal, right? Not holding that Zorah so much it's going to sterilize the animal. Good? Anyway, so now you have a problem. If that's the case, says the Gemara, Aval Shakabanis Moidalei, Ve'ela, Hodit Nanya, Loichin Mehen Behema, Lekarbin money. The brisa that said you can buy from a guy. Who's the Tana? Lei Rebbe Eliezer, Lei Rabbanon. Guys, if you're going to say the reason the din of the Chachamim is only by paraduma, but any other animal you are chayish l'snus, we have a brisa that says you can go ahead and buy an animal from a guy for a carbon. Who is it? Not Rebbe Eliezer, certainly not the Chachamim. It must be the Chachamim argue not only by paraduma, but by karbonis as well, that you're not chayish l'snus. And Rav Padis has a good teretz. And Rav Padis' teretz is good. V'oitanya behedya. My oisrila chabrua l'Rebbe Eliezer. What did they answer Rebbe Eliezer? Called soin kedar. All the tzon of the Yishmaelim. Yikbatzu lach yalu al misbechi. You can go ahead and buy from the Yishmaelim karbonis and put them on the mizbeach. And trust me, when it comes to znus, there are no big lowlives than Yishmaelim. We saw the Gemara in Kedushin, right? That 10 kavim of znus came to the world, and the Arabs took 9 of it. Okay, so therefore, Rav Padis has a teretz. Guys, good. No, Rav Padis' teretz. He has held the svara of paraduma. Clearly, is Rebbe Eliezer who says you can't buy a chayish l'snus. He's the Tana of our Mishnah, and the Chachamim who say you're not chayish l'snus is the Tana of the brisa that you can buy a carbon. So we have 3 terutzim, right? Taflifis teretz, the difference between a guy's carbon, his own animal, he won't do anything to. That's the brisa. Our Mishnah, the Jew's animal, he would do. We have the teretz of Ravina, our Mishnah speaking lechatchila, the brisa speaking b'di'eved. And the third teretz of Padis, our Mishnah is Rebbe Eliezer, and this is why this is the Chacham. Okay, let's see the first taisvus in this parak. Let's go back to the first taisvus in this parak. Says taisvus. Ein mamidim behemis bepundikis alav dekachavim. The Tanya Bigamara. Ein meisim behem leroya shalahem v'yeshli tein tam. Alma anu saimchim liyache behemosenu imahem. Why do we saimich on that we are able to go ahead? I guess they had animals in those days, and they give them over to Goyim. They give over the animals to the Goyim. Not only we give over the animals to the Goyim, we give it over to the Raya. Rav also had charata, and Rav said the reason is because why? Is because is because you're going to be chayish that the where's the sort of Rav? Yeah, that you're going to go ahead and sterilize your animal. So Rav also had charata from that. Elo Omer Rabbeinu Tam. So here's a kasha. So why do we do it? You know, guys, we just finished the Gemara. And we said you can't be miyached with an animal. The Elo Omer Rabbeinu Tam. The Samchina and Ahod the Mishani Rav Padis the Gemara with Soimich and Rav Padis is teretz. The Muki Masnison Kereb Eliezer. The Chayesh LeRevia. Ubraisa de Lekuchen Mehen Behema. We can buy animals. The carbon. The Chayesh LeRevia. Kirabonon. Bonon Kaime Kirabonon. Guys, Rapadis is teretz. So where's Rapadis is teretz? Fred tells the kasha, how could we give an animal to a guy? The Mishnah says not. Who's the Mishnah according to? The Das Yochid. It's Rabbi Eliezer. Who says you could buy a carbon from a guy? The Chachamim. Why could you buy a carbon from a guy? Because we're not chayish l'revia. Memel, if you pass like the Chachamim, not like a Mishnah, you're able to give it over to a guy, miyach to a guy. Pasha teretz. That's Rapadis. Now, what about Ravina? Ravina came after Rav Padis. Usually Ravina is the last. V'afagav the Ravina shahaya seif hayra poligaleha v'shani shnuya achrina, and therefore it should be asa lichatchila mikamakim nearin divrei Rav Padis ikka. Says Taisus, the words in the three terutzim, the words of Rav Padis seem to hold the most sway the truth. Chada midahagdim divrei Ravina dvarav. If Ravina came after Rav Padis, in the order it should be, he should be saying last, guys. Why do we put him before him? Because he wanted to put Rav Padis last. By putting Rav Padis last, you're saying he had the last say. Right? The Rav Padis, Koydin Ravina, Yamim Rabim, he was many years before. Okay? So very geschmack. So this Taisus would explain why we're Makel, again, we're not involved with animals, but in those times they were in the Middle Ages. And so therefore, since we pass on Rav Padis says we're not chayish for, so you're not chayish l'revia. Very geschmack. Ad kan le pligi ele b'chashasha. Avol heiche devadei Rava pasla. The machloikis between the machloikis in Rav Eliezer and the Chachamim, where there was a chashash. What happens if you know unequivocally that the goy was roivea the paraduma, that an actlessness? Everyone, even the Chacham, would say it's asa. It's not a chashash, it's a vadai. Now the question is why? If it's only a bedek habayis, it's not kedushas aguf. Why the dinyan of ravo is by a carbon? You can't bring it on the mizbeach, but you're not bringing this on the mizbeach. So why would it be asa? If you know for sure, why would it be asa? That's the Gemara. In other words, now the Gemara is digressing. We answered off the stira from the Brisa to the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is digressing to discuss para aduma. The reason why it's asa, of course, the reason machloikis is because it's chashad. Once it leaves the world of chashad and it's a vadai, everyone holds it's asa. But why? If it's not a carbon, if it's not kedushas aguf, why should it be asa? That's the Gemara's kasha. Akan lepligiel b'chashasha aval heicha de vadai rava pasla shmamina the para kachim is be'achi shmamina that para dum is kachim is be'achi the kachim bedek habayis. If it was kodesh bedek habayis mi mifsalaba revia, it would not be asa revia. So it must be that it's kedushas haguf. Says Gemara, you have no raya. Now, what happens if it has kedushas haguf, guys? Then, in order to be poided, you'd have to have a mum. In order to be right, kedushas haguf. In order to be poided, it would have to have a mum, right? That's one of the nafkaminas. Like Rashi says, kachim mizbeachi didn't kedushas mizbeachi yeshlo lifsel berevia b'lin yipedia b'lin nafka leilchoyel b'lin mum psulim mikdashim. You had to have a mum. And for the Gemara, no. Really, it's kedushas bedek abayis. So why was the act of revia answering it? Shiny parah de chatas kari rachmana. It's called chatas. The Torah calls it a chatas. Mei chatas. Paras chatas. It's a chatas. So really, it's not a chatas, but it's called a chatas. Since it's called a chatas, there's the chumrawad of a mum. I don't know if you could be pointed without a mum. Elamiata tifsil b'yaitz doifin. If you're telling me he has the din wad of a carbon, if it's a yaitz doifin, it's a C-section. An animal that's a C-section cannot be bought as a carbon. A paraduma, if it's a C-section, should not be able to be used as a paraduma. You can't use it as a paraduma. Alamatanya hekdesha b'yaitz doifin psula. If you magdish b'yaitz doifin, it's possible. Reb Shimon machsher. Reb Shimon says it's kasha. Now, if it's called a chatas, why would Reb Shimon machsher it? Yaitz doifin. Why would Reb Shimon machsher it? Reb Shimon l'tamei. Dama yaitz doifin vlad ma'al yahu. The reason why it's kosher, because he says that yaitz doifin is vlad ma'al, right? Right? That yaitz doifin is considered a full-fledged vlad. Rashi says vlad ma'al mesech nida yaitz doifin and yoshvin alav yemei tuma v'yemei taira. Speaking about a human birth, so we know that there's yemei tuma, zayin, and 7 for a boy, 33 for mei taira, 7 mei tuma, and for a girl it's 14 to 66. So if the Tanakama holds, since it's Isha ki sazriya v'yolda zacha, Isha ki yivalet, she has to go ahead and give birth. She has to give birth. So if it's not through the vaginal canal, it's not considered birth. But Shimon says it is. So now, very good. Enachinami. The reason why you could use it is because it's considered born according to Shimon. Just like Shimon says by a human, it's considered born yaitz daifin. So to what? An animal. Ivan Rabbi Yochanan back in the Gemara. Maida hayir of Shimon linyan kachem sheina kaddish. He's maida is not kaddish, so you have a problem. So if it's paris, if you're telling me that it's called a chatas, and that's why harva would be asa, then in fact it should be asa. It should be asa if it's if it's a daifin. Ella shiny para hoil umum paiselba. Devar erva v'avodah Zorah nami paiselba. So we're getting off the terrace of chatas, guys. We're getting off the terrace of chatas because of the kasha from Rabbi Shimon, right? Rabbi Shimon's moide by kachim that it's puzzle. So guys, here's the kasha. If you hold that a paraduma has the same geder as karbanis, because it's called chatas, you should not be able to go ahead and use it as a yaitz daifin. Yet Rabbi Shimon says you can. So the Gemara says, therefore, we're getting off that teretz, and we're saying there's a special reason why a paraduma, that an act of znus was done to it, is asa, not because it's a chatas. Another reason. What's the reason? It says, ki mashchasam bahem. Mashchasam is mumbam. That's what it says. Now, mashchasam, an act of hashchasa, mumbam. V'tani debei Rabbi Yishmael, kol mokum shnema hashchasa. Any place it says hashchasa, literally corruption, Eina ela dvar erva v'avodah Zorah. Dvar erva dechsiv by Noach ki hishkas kol basas darka el haaretz. V'avodah Zorah dechsiv pentashchisin v'asisim lechem pesel. Good. So very geschmack. V'haparanami ha'ilamum paiselba v'av erva v'yisachavim paselba. So therefore, you have a good reason. Really, in other words, we're digressing. What's the digression? We brought in the machlokes between Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim. We brought in the machlokes. We brought in machlokes between Rebbe Eliezer and the Chachamim. We brought in to go and said Rav Padis that what Rebbe Eliezer's chayish l'snos and Rebbe Chachamim not chayish l'snos. But the answer on Mishnah is Rebbe Eliezer, and the Brisa is the Chachamim. That's great. We now digressed and analyze that for itself. What did you say? You said where there's a chashad by paraduma, then what? Then there's machlokes. If there's no chashad, if vadai, a person knows that there was an act of snus done to the animal, everyone agrees you can't use it. But why? It's only kachi bedek abayis. Right? The Gemara in the first teretz, it's called a chatas. Right? The Gemara, if it's called a chatas and has the hagudara of a carbon, like Rav Shimon, yaitz daifin should be Yotze Daifen should be asar, because if Shimon's moida that Yotze Daifen by a carbon is no good, yet by paradum he says it is good, so that shows it's not a carbon. So we're answering that mumbam is the lashon of shchasa and mumbam that need perfection. That where hashchasa is involved, even if it's not a carbon, it's out. Where's what's hashchasa? Avodah Zorah and snus. So since this animal, it's considered a mum in the paraduma. What's the mum? That an act of hashchasa was done, even though it's kachet bedek habayis, it still would be what asa to use.